The story begins in the cold pre-dawn darkness over the Hindu Kush Mountains, where a lone transport aircraft hummed quietly above the clouds. Inside, a woman in a charcoal gray jumpsuit sat with her eyes closed, steadying her breath. No one on the aircraft dared to ask her name. They simply called her what everyone at JSOC did, Ghost. Not because she hid, but because no one who worked with her ever saw her more than once. Missions ended, planes landed, teams rotated, and she vanished back into the world like she had never existed. Tonight's mission was one that demanded her presence. Intelligence analysts had identified a rogue facility controlled by a mercenary group that rivaled any nation in resources and brutality. They had captured 2 American intelligence officers. The Pentagon wanted them back. But they also wanted the truth about what was happening inside that mountain bunker. A conventional team would draw attention. A SEAL squad would need extraction. But Ghost needed neither. She worked alone because the margin of error in missions like these was so small that one extra pair of hands was sometimes one too many. As the aircraft moved closer to the drop zone, the cabin lights dimmed. Ghost stood, tightened the straps on her gear, and checked the specially modified chute built for silent descent. She didn't speak a word. She didn't need to. The crew watched as the rear door opened, and a sheet of cold mountain wind swallowed the silence. Ghost stepped forward, waited for the green light, and disappeared into the night like a shadow falling off the sky. Her descent was controlled, almost effortless. The moonlight barely touched her gear, absorbing rather than reflecting it. She drifted silently toward the jagged cliffs, landing on a narrow ledge that most climbers wouldn't dare to stand on. She packed her chute, stowed it in a crack between rocks, and paused only to listen. There was nothing but distant wind. That meant she was already ahead of the enemy's detection grid. She moved lower across the rocks, stepping from foothold to foothold with the precision of someone who had trained her body to erase every unnecessary motion. The entrance to the underground facility was disguised as a rockslide. Thermal drones couldn't detect it. Satellites only saw rubble, but Ghost had studied the terrain for 6 days straight before deployment. She knew exactly where a hairline seam in the stone wasn't natural. She approached the false wall and slid her hand into a narrow gap. Her glove brushed against cold steel. A magnetic lock, military grade. Not a challenge. She removed a sheet-thin hacking device from her belt and pressed it onto the seam. The lock popped silently within seconds. She pushed the wall just enough to slip inside. The corridor was dark, illuminated only by the faint red glow of motion sensors lining the walls. Ghost stepped through them like she was dancing between raindrops. Every sensor had a blind spot, invisible to the untrained eye. She moved through each gap with fluid precision. 2 minutes in, she reached the first guard post. A mercenary sat half asleep, rifle leaning against the wall. Ghost didn't attempt to sneak past. She approached him from behind, placed a hand over his mouth, and lowered him silently to the floor. He didn't struggle. She ensured he wouldn't wake, then dragged him behind a supply crate. Further in, the facility opened into a sprawling underground chamber. Metal walkways crossed above a maze of computer stations, labs, and weapons lockers. The mercenaries here weren't amateurs. They were former special operators from different countries, some with reputations brutal enough to make even battle-hardened soldiers nervous. But Ghost didn't hesitate. She didn't measure danger the way others did. She measured time, angles, noise, and opportunity. She crouched behind a ventilation pipe and observed the movement patterns. 3 guards walked in cycles of 33 seconds. They never looked up. That detail was all she needed. She climbed silently to the beam above and slid across it until she reached the corridor that led toward the holding cells. Down the hallway, she could hear voices. 2 guards stood outside the reinforced door, discussing the prisoners inside, the captured American officers who had refused to reveal the codes the mercenaries wanted. Ghost listened carefully to the guards' patterns, waiting for the moment both looked away. She slipped behind them and tapped both shoulders at once. The guards spun, confused, and before their rifles lifted an inch, she knocked them unconscious with 2 precise blows. Inside the holding cell, the 2 American officers were shocked to see a single woman walk through the door, mask obscuring her face, movements controlled and precise. She cut their restraints and motioned for them to stand. One whispered, "Which team are you with?" Ghost replied with a calm, low voice, "You won't remember seeing me." The officer nodded, not understanding but not questioning. She led them into the service tunnels under the facility, avoiding every walkway filled with mercenary patrols. But as they approached the secondary exit, alarms blared. Someone had discovered the unconscious guards. The facility lit up with emergency lights, and Ghost moved faster, leading the officers through twisting corridors while gunfire echoed behind them. A squad of mercenaries blocked the final exit. Ghost motioned for the officers to stay back. She moved forward alone. The mercenaries recognized her stance. One muttered, "It's her. The Phantom from the intel reports." They raised their rifles, but Ghost was already in motion. She evaded the first spray of bullets, closed the distance, and fought with a speed that felt unreal. Within seconds, the squad was on the floor, silent. She pushed open the escape hatch leading to a narrow gorge. A transport drone waited above, remotely piloted by JSOC. Ghost strapped the officers into the harness cables and signaled the drone to lift off. The officers rose into the air, watching the woman below, the one who had saved them from an impossible place, grow smaller beneath them. Then she stepped back into the shadows. She didn't wait for extraction. She didn't plan to. Her mission was complete, and like always, she would disappear before anyone could ask questions. The drone operators expected her to radio when she reached the secondary hide site. She never did. By the time ground teams arrived at the mountain, Ghost was already gone, leaving no tracks, no clue, no trace. Back at JSOC headquarters, the officers told the debriefing team that their rescuer never even gave a call sign. Analysts smiled. They knew exactly who it was. The woman the Pentagon never confirmed, never documented, and never assigned twice to the same group. The legend lived because no one ever saw her twice. That is why JSOC calls her Ghost. And somewhere in another part of the world, another mission file had just been tagged with a single word, pending. Because when the impossible needed to be done quietly, there was only one person they could call. And she always answered. Ghost didn't need recognition. She didn't need medals. She was the shadow that protected the people who lived in the light. And she would continue that mission, unseen and unmatched, as long as threats existed. Her story was not written in reports. It was carried in whispers across elite units, in the quiet respect of operators who had never met her but knew she walked the same battlefields. A guardian nobody could identify. A warrior nobody could follow. A name that existed only in the silence after danger. Ghost.